already. I started to peel my first apple, and I'm going to finish peeling my second apple. Today I'm using lady apples. So you can see they have a yellowish, pink, dark red.
Very nice.
Red.
So we go ahead and get started so we can all see and hear Karen clearly. So if you guys can go ahead and mute your microphones, that's great. Otherwise,
These are firm apples. As opposed to some apples, they tend to be a little bit softer. So if it's a softer apple, like a Macintosh, it doesn't cook as well. Although we won't be cooking this too long. If you were making baked apples, the Macintosh is a little bit too soft and too watery, and they don't generally bake as well. They start to fall apart. So a nice firm apple when you're baking. You could use a Granny Smith. I find them tart, and I did not want to add a lot of sugar in this recipe, so I went with a sweeter apple called the Pink Lady. So I peeled the apple. I'm going to cut it in half and take out the core. The core is the middle portion where you find the seeds and the stem. You might want to ask an adult for help when it comes to doing this, just because it could be a little tricky. They do sell an apparatus called an apple corer, and that takes the core out. I do not have one here in the Wellness Center, but that makes it go a little faster. So if you have an apple corer at home, take that out of there. One more. Take those seeds away. We don't want to eat those apple seeds. They're not so good for us. They could give you a bellyache. So we want to be careful that we get all the apple seeds out. The last section is seed and core. And then I'm going to turn on my stove top. Okay, there we go. Okay. So those are my apples. Now I'm going to turn on my stove top, and we're going to make the topping. So the topping is the oat crisp. So we will be using some oatmeal, some cinnamon, we'll put some walnuts. So I'm going to put a little cooking spray. But before I do that, I have a few walnuts here. I'm going to toast these walnuts in this pan, because I like to toast my walnuts. They have a nice nutty flavor if we toast them for a little bit. So while that's toasting, I'm just going to slice up my apples. And we want these pieces about, I call this fingernail size, because it's about the size of my fingernail. And then they're not too big, and they cook quick, and they're very easy to manage. So I just chop that up quick like that. This is a really quick recipe, so you can even make this after dinner if you're looking for a dessert. I used 1 apple per person, so if you have other family members you'd like to make it for, you can increase your recipe, but you can count on 1 apple per person as the right portion size. I'm just going to stir up my walnuts here. It smells a little popcorn-like. It's toasting. Okay, so I'll leave that right there. I finished chopping my apples. Okay, and on to my last one. Okay, Okay, smell these nicely toasted walnuts. Look, there we go. Just a few. You see they're starting to brown right there. Look how good they look. Okay. All right. So I'm going to take that off of there. Turn this down a little. Put my walnuts back into my little dish because I'll be coming back to these nice toasted walnuts. Okay. So then I shall put some cooking spray into my little top. Okay. Back to the heat. And now we're going to make our oat topping. So I have my maple syrup measured out here. And this is 2 tablespoons. I'm going to put half into my pan here. I'll put just half of that because I'm going to save the other half for the apples. And I'm going to put a little vanilla. Let me just turn this off. I'm going to set this down over here. So I want that off the heat for a minute while I open up my vanilla. It's a teaspoon. So I'm going to just go quickly. You could measure that out. Teaspoon of vanilla. Those kind of melt together. And then I'm going to, you could put your cinnamon and nutmeg. I'm going to put my oats in. This is my oats already measured. Stir those up a little. They start to stick together. It's getting a little lumpy. I'm going to stir in my seasonings. My cinnamon. This is 1 teaspoon going in with this. And the 2nd teaspoon will go in with the apples. Mix that in there really good.
Wasn't it half teaspoon in oats and half teaspoon?
So let's just double check. So we have a half a teaspoon of cinnamon. I stand corrected on that. A half a teaspoon of cinnamon going in there. And the other half of the teaspoon will go in with our apples. Conchka's with me. She's fact checking me. Okay, so there it is. It looks good. I'm going to put in a splash of nutmeg. This is optional. If you have other seasonings you like for the fall, you could use pumpkin pie spice. You could use a little ginger. I'm going to put just a splash of nutmeg. It's pretty powerful, so just a splash. And there we have it. Okay. Mix that up. I'm toasting that a little bit. We'll give that a minute. All right. Then I'm going to add a little bit, I'm going to add in a little bit of this brown sugar. Just put some in here. Throw that up there. Make sure that mixes in. Turn this on again. I just want to make sure I toast it. And I'm going to put the rest of my brown sugar in there. All right. So once I get that mixed in really well, my toasted oats. Okay, so that's our topping. I'm going to add the walnuts last because I've already toasted those. Here we go. That is our oat topping. Okay. Okay, part 1 is done. I'm going to take my oat topping and I'm going to stick it right into my red bowl here. And then we are going on to make our apples. Yes. Okay. Okay. Now, back here, we are coming with our apples. I'm going to put the apples in first because this is a little bit hot. You could put a little bit more cooking spray if you're concerned about your apples sticking. Ooh, I got a lot of apples in here. Okay, so I'm going to heat these apples up. I'm going to turn my burner back on. I'm going to take the rest of my maple syrup and I'm going to drizzle it over my apples. Okay, here we go. And I'm going to put just a splash of water in there because I don't want it to burn. I want to keep my apples a little soft. So I've got a full pan. You probably would want to use a bigger pan. I'm a little tight for space here in my setup today because my colleague is running another class in the next room. So if you are full like this, you don't have a lot of room to stir. So use a bigger frying pan. You could use a pot too if you're concerned about spilling over. So very carefully, I'm going to turn these apples and let them cook a little. And then I'm going to sprinkle my other half a teaspoon of cinnamon over my mixture. And this is going to smell so delicious. I wish you were here, you could smell it. But I know when you make it at home, you're going to really love this. These apples cook down really fast. Just like to evenly coat everything there. And there we have it. I'm going to let these apples cook down. So we want to cook the apples until they're soft. So think of them, we say with pasta al dente, meaning it's soft but not mushy. It's a little firm to the touch. So that's the spring we want to have to our apple. If you cook them too soft, they get mushy. So we don't want to cook them too soft. And you just keep these going. If you want to cook them on low and put a lid on your pot or your pan, you could certainly do that. There's a lot of moisture in the apples, so if you put a lid on, they do cook down. So while these are cooking, I want to tell you how fantastic apples are for your health. We have a saying, you may have heard it, an apple a day keeps the doctor away. That is so true. Apples bring us lots of nutrients in the form of energy from the natural sugar or sweetness of the apple. It brings us fiber from the pectins in the fruit. And also, when we eat the skin, this is dietary fiber. So you may even like to do this recipe with the skin on if you'd like more fiber in your diet. Either way, I just decided I would take the skin off today, but you could certainly do this recipe. Another secret I will tell you is sometimes I'll make the apples like this and I'll put them on my French toast in the morning. So this is really nice. If you kept cooking these apples down and you cooked them until they were mushy, they could make applesauce. And you can make applesauce fine, or you can make a chunky applesauce. And chunky applesauce can be added to oatmeal. It can be put in your yogurt. It can be a topping for different dishes. I'm going to add, Sam, just a little bit of, back to my other little bit of water, just to keep this moist. Because I don't want my apples to burn, I want them to stew a little bit. So I'm going to cook them just a tad longer. You can see that they're getting a little soft. If I had a lid, I would put a lid on it, but it's not necessary. So back to our apples. So if you watched our Special Olympics videos about apples, you would be a specialist by now. Apples come in many varieties. We grow them in New York State. We grow them some in New Jersey, but the largest number of apples that we have in the market actually come from Washington. And there are many different colors to apples. They can be yellow, they can be deep red, they can be our pink lady, they can be green. So the color actually relates to the nutrients that are in them. And the deeper the red, the more what we call antioxidants are in there. And that's really important for keeping our blood vessels healthy. The antioxidants can also prevent cancer. They're very important for our health. When we eat fiber, fiber keeps our bowel healthy. So it prevents constipation, can prevent diverticulitis, diverticulosis. Alright, so I'm just gonna keep stirring my apple here. Put another little drop of water in there because I don't want to set off the fire alarm. We'll turn this down. It's very hot. Alright. Okay. So these are pretty close to being done. Look how wonderful they look. Okay. So one of the things we like to do in the fall is to go apple picking. And I know one of our athletes already said he has plans on Saturday to go apple picking. You can make this recipe with pretty much any apple. So whatever you pick. As I said, I do like to use the firm apples. If you're using the Macintosh, you can certainly have very good results. They're not as good for making pies because, as I said, the apples that are Macintosh, they get a little bit too soft, and so then your pie might get a little bit mushy. But certainly you would bake it less so that it didn't cook quite so much. So we can always adjust the cooking time based on the apple. This is smelling so delicious. Look at that. All right. Okay, so now that my recipe is done, what I'm going to do is I'm taking this ramekin. It's a small bowl. This is in the shape of a heart. You might have this shape. This is a little smaller. This one's a little bit too small because we had large apples, but this is about the right size. If we took our pink lady and chopped it up, we would fill this ramekin with about 1 cup of chopped apples, and that's considered a serving. So with our apple dish today, we're going to put half. We have 2 ramekins, so we're making 2 portions. And I'm going to split my apples between the 2 ramekins. Oh, look how wonderfully delicious that looks. Okay. Perfect. All right. So we're done with that. I'm going to just make a little bit of space over here so you can see what we have going on. So here is our beautifully heated apple. And to this, we're going to add our oat topping. It looks a little granola-like. It's got some nuts in it. Smells wonderful. Cinnamon and toasted nuts and a little brown sugar and vanilla and maple. Then we split this between our 2 dishes. So you can have a little bit. I don't want to overfill and make a mess. But, so there you go. We have apple crisp for 2. Fantastic. If anyone has any questions, I'm going to turn it back over to Amelia so she can check the chat box, and we're going to taste our apple crisp shortly here at the Wellness Center.
Awesome, guys. So I will go ahead and give you today's code word for our apple crisp recipe, which is apple. So it's APPLE, apple.